morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'm going to just start out by introducing myself. I'm Tahira, Investor Relations for Blackbridge Capital Partners, and currently learning a lot on this journey. I want to invite Jordan to kind of just give us a little bit about herself first, if that's okay with you, Jordan.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me here. I'm Jordan Hegemann. Some of you guys know me from Multifamily Mindset. I'm the underwriting specialist there. My passion really is kind of the entire acquisition process. So sourcing deals, researching deals, then obviously underwriting. I could underwrite deals all day long. It's I asked of it. So that's personally what I'm working on is more acquisitions in general.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here with us, especially for taking our questions.
Of course.
But I guess what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just start. So the first question I really had for you, and that was kind of submitted, was how did you start multifamily investing, and how did you discover that underwriting was your strong suit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my background was in finance starting out. So at 16 years old, I became an associate accountant for basically under an accountant at a company, and just focused on learning that skill because it was something that really interested me. So through my early career life, I was really focused on the finance side of things. You know, profit and loss statements were something that I was very familiar with in, both business as well as personal. That was something that was a passion to me. I had a very small coaching business where I helped people on their personal finance side, as well as showing them, okay, what's coming in, what's coming out, where's everything going. So started out that way. At a very young age, I knew that real estate was something I was interested in. So after 6 months of being married, I convinced my husband to buy a little house that we flipped. And so he was very against it and was like, well, we're just barely married. We're so young. Why are we buying a house? And I was like, I'm sick of paying somebody else's mortgage. So we did that a couple times. And then I realized that single family was so hard, and it was a lot of work. We did everything pretty much ourselves. So, at 9 months pregnant with my daughter, I realized, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, okay, what's next? How can I scale this? How can I, take a step back from, actually the thing that was like the nail in the coffin was I was 9 months pregnant painting kitchen cabinets, and I put the handle pull on sideways, and my husband's like, that's crooked. And I started crying, and I was like, I was like, right, what's next? So I had kind of been following along with Tyler and Melissa's journey. I've known them for a very long time. So I was like, what the heck are they doing? Like, how are they buying these, multifamily properties? And, Melissa would post and be like, we just bought this 100 and something unit property. And I'd be like, what the heck? Like, I just bought one house and my bank account is like, why are you doing that? So
yeah, definitely.
I reached out to her and was like, hey, tell me about what you're doing. How are you guys accomplishing this? And she gave me her little spiel, and I was like, well, how do I get involved? And she's like, well, what value could you bring? And so that's when I was like, well, I've been in finance. My background's really like that number standpoint. She's like, well, that's a good thing for us. We're actually looking for an additional underwriter. What do you know about underwriting? And I was like, nothing. And she was like, okay, well, would you be willing to learn? And I was like, oh, of course. Like I love to learn, and I love to just immerse myself in whatever it is I'm learning. So they hired me as just initially, looking over deals and, trying to understand the underwriting. And I just fell in love. It was something that just made sense. Math has always been something that, I just love. And it's something that I think makes more sense than the English language most of the time. So I knew that real estate was something I loved. And I knew that, the numbers and formulas kind of thing
Listo,
was
brother, que estés bien.
so I just dove in, and it's been something that has just been exciting ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. At 16 years old, you were already working basically in finance. That, even if it was like
Yeah.
under someone else, that's amazing. At 16 years old, I was getting into trouble. I wasn't doing the things I should have been doing that I wish I would have done. But now
Right.
I have a chance to teach my daughter, and she'll be one
Exactly.
step ahead. But no, that's amazing. And just to even say that you started in, like, I feel like most people do start in like that single family home, and they kind of realize like, wow, this is a
It's so
lot of
much
work,
work.
a lot more than you really anticipate. But even just being 9 months pregnant, that commendable, because I would not. I would be
I
too
was like,
exhausted.
this house has to be perfect before we bring our baby home. And then I was like, why am I doing this to myself?
All the emotional part of it too, being pregnant, the hormones are like everywhere. So
Yeah.
props to you for that, because absolutely that is hard. And I guess you kind of did answer, what aspect of your life really did play a role in decision making, but it seems like to me that you've kind of always been on this path.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've done other things throughout my life as well. Um I actually, in college, I managed like a cafe. I was a kitchen manager and managed an entire kitchen. And I look back on that, I'm like, that was such a different lifetime ago. Like I thought that like food was where I wanted to go. And thankfully I'm not in that anymore. But that like it's just so interesting. I took a lot of like diverts to figure it out, but then once it clicked, it really clicked.
No, that's amazing. And so I guess my follow-up question would be like, who influenced you at a young age? Who kind of played that role for you to, kind of like what I'm saying, like my daughter's gonna have like now a different step in
Yeah.
her life. I want to be that influence her, but for you, like, who was that influence?
If I can be completely honest, it was a negative influence that pushed me this way.
Oh,
I grew up in a family that was very poor. My mom was a single mom. My dad was kind of in and out, and she struggled to put food on the table. She struggled to, have a life that, she wanted to have for us. And I remember at 13 years old, my mom had bought her first home, and we lost it. And it like she wasn't able to make her payments, and the home got repossessed, and I was devastated. I was like, what in that, like, how did this happen? Like, what's going on? And I vowed to myself at that time, like, I'm going to do everything I can to provide, excuse me, to
no,
provide
you're
a
fine.
better life. And something that I knew I had control over was myself. And I learned that at a very young age, the only thing you can control is you. And so I did everything in my power to become a better version of myself, and provide opportunities for other people as well. That was something that was such a passion for me. I want to provide a better life for those all around me. So I had seen things about real estate investing just at a young age, and saw that people make money by owning real estate. And my grandparents had owned a very small multifamily. It was a triplex that was in a very prominent part of town where there was a lot of traffic, and they did really well with it. And so I knew, okay, this is something that works. And they were able to give back. I mean, in our time of need, we lived in that triplex for a little while. And so I was like, okay, so it's something that's at least paying the bills, where we're able to live here, and it's not hurting my grandparents financially. So it was kind of a mix of that really pushed me towards real estate investing.
No, that's amazing. At 13 years old, you went through a really tough time. And for you to kind of take the path of resilience, it could have gone either way, really. It could have
Yeah.
just been, well, I'll follow suit because this is what I know.
Yeah.
But you really took it and kind of were like, no, I'm going to be the change I want. And I'm not going to allow myself to experience the same experiences with my own family. So um, that left me speechless, honestly. Thank you for sharing that, because many of us, I think, have all kind of lived in that stance where we do come from backgrounds where maybe our parents didn't understand like the demographics of how to manage money. And now, we're now learning it as adults, and we're seeing how much of a difference just having the knowledge really can change
For
in your
sure.
life.
Oh, for sure. And it's hard because, I don't fault my mom at all for, what happened. And I actually thank her for it often. And she's often like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, thank you. Like, thank you for, being willing to teach me and being willing to, be that example that might not have been the best example, but I learned from it. So it was something that she never got taught that. And her parents were very just, they didn't like, it was a taboo to talk about money. It was a taboo to allow your children to understand the financial aspect of your life. So she never really learned.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to pivot a little bit here. It might be like a strong pivot, but my next question is, and really this is a question that was thrown in, but what is your approach when you evaluate the potential value add-ons with multifamily? That was a really strong pivot from
That
this.
was,
Sorry,
but
I'm
actually
going-
it kind of does tie into it because I had mentioned like I want to, help people and provide opportunities for other people. So as I started in real estate investing, my investors are my number one priority. I want to protect them at all odds. So I'm a very conservative underwriter in the way that I approach everything that I look at. I want to make sure that everything that I input into my business plan is achievable and even on the conservative side of things. So when I'm looking at value adds, I always look for facts. I always look for, what is possible and what data shows me that that is possible. So when I'm looking at, rent increases, I look at that rent from every different angle. I look at it from, the unit type. I look at it from, the square footage, the price per square foot. I look at it from the age of the property. I look at it from the quality of the property, all to narrow it down to, okay, this is what we can actually achieve. And then when it comes to like other income items like parking and pet rent and stuff like that, I try and actually make my deal work prior to inputting any of those things in. I want to make sure that I'm able to provide cash flow to my investors without having to put the what ifs in, because pet rent isn't guaranteed. Parking isn't guaranteed. They can opt out of all of those things. They can say, oh, I don't want to have a pet because I don't want to pay that. So I try and just be conservative in what I'm doing when it comes to the value adds.
Amazing. And so I guess to follow that up, what type of resources or data sources would you say that you use when you are looking at a deal when you're wanting to underwrite?
Yeah, that's a great question. I use CoStar a lot. I look at, kind of what they're getting on their properties. A lot of the time on there, they'll have their like other income items listed. I also use apartments.com. I don't know if you know this, but they're actually owned by the same company. So CoStar owns apartments.com. So it's very up-to-date information that's on there. And that's kind of how CoStar is able to, make sure they have up to date on their reports as well. So I use that. And sometimes, honestly, I just call the apartments and I say, hey, like, I'm looking to move here. What does this look like? What type of, I have a dog. What does that cost? Am I going to have to pay for parking or, kind of just secret shopping in a sense?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a secret shopper scenario.
Yeah.
That is actually, I think, one of the smartest ways that you really get like honest answers, because they're hoping to like reel you in, right? They're hoping to be like, no, you're gonna come like rent my apartment. So yes, I'll give you all the information, all for free.
Yes. Yep. And then also the other thing is property management companies. I am, a big advocate for really establishing relationships with property management companies, because you get an understanding of what the tenant base in that area is looking for. So you can ask those questions like, okay, so if we were to implement covered parking, is that something that you feel this tenant base would, be interested in? And sometimes they're like, no, like they don't care about that. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to waste my money trying to put in covered parking for them to just not care. So that's something that, has proven to be, really effective as well.
Now, do you work with just like one particular management company, or is it like depending on like which region you're in?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. We do have one primary property management company that we go to first, and then if we're able to, if they're in that area and have the knowledge needed to run our property, then we'll go with them. If not, we just do our research and do kind of property management interviews to get to know other property managers in the area that we could work with.
Okay, awesome. My next question would be, and so this question was submitted, how can we access the Friday underwriting calls?
Yeah, that's a great
And is
question.
there a link to be provided?
Yeah, so those calls are always going to be posted on the Facebook page as well. So in the event section, it's a reoccurring event. The registration link is the same. So you just click on that registration link, register for the call, and then it will provide you can add it to your calendar and everything. But it's every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, awesome. I know our underwriter couldn't be here today. Our partner that he handles the underwriting. I know he was really looking forward to asking the question. Unfortunately, he's in Singapore still.
Oh.
Yeah, he had some family business to attend to, but he should be back in a week. So I will let him know so he can get on this, because he's very excited to he wanted to be on today's call because, again, he's very much the numbers guy. I think we talked about him briefly when we had our call, and unfortunately, because of the time difference and everything, it was just, I think for him it's like, I don't know, Eric, help me.
12 hour, yeah, 12 hours ahead.
It's a 12-hour.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, I was just speaking to him about 2 hours ago, and he's still up at 4:35 in the morning. So he's a trooper.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane.
So yeah,
Yeah.
he did mention that he did want to ask a couple questions. So if he wasn't able to make it, that he says his best and hopefully get on a call with you hopefully soon.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, that was a few months ago. One of my business partners was in Australia, and yeah, kind of same thing where it was like we'd be like, all right, when can we meet? And she'd be like, I'll wake up way early for this, and or I'll stay up late, and we're like, okay.
Our Aussie friends really get the tail end of it sometimes. It's you gotta adjust, But
Yeah.
yeah.
Or the other way around. We have this.
Yeah.
Someone has to make a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess to follow up that question, the next question really submitted was, in the multifamily industry, we need to underwrite many deals before closing one. Should we reach out to the team whenever we underwrite a property? And at what stage in the acquisition process should we contact the underwriter specialist to confirm that our numbers entered into the model are correct?
Yeah. So in my opinion, it's in the beginning, you're going to be talking to us a lot, and those deals we're going to be considering those practice deals. We're going to be going through, helping you understand how to properly utilize the template, because it is something new. Not everybody knows how to, use Excel. Not everybody knows how to input the numbers accurately. So in the beginning, it's a lot of like trial and error, and we don't mind you setting up calls to go over that. Obviously might seem like dream crushing at the beginning, because we'll be like, no, you did this wrong. Oh no, you did this. And it's a lot of just learning at the beginning. So the goal is in the beginning, you're going to be using these practice deals, and you're going to use those to understand the template. And then from there, it's going to get less and less frequent until you actually have a deal that works out in the template, hits the metrics. You're like, this is something I want to move forward on. And then we want to look over it with you. We want to make sure, kind of poke holes in it to make sure, okay, did you do your research right? Where is your information coming from? If, a sponsor or an investor asks these questions, do you, know how to find those? So in the beginning, it's a lot, and then it gets less. And then once you get a deal, it's a lot again.
Okay. So would you say that, so even if we don't necessarily think that this is a good deal, like it would just be a good practice to go through that model with you?
Yeah. And obviously, be respectful of all of our time. If, you know, if it's like an everyday thing, it's probably a little too much. But if it's like, oh, once a week or every other week or something like that, that's totally fine. Because like I said, our goal is to prepare you and give you those tools up front. So it does lessen it, because, you know, I have people that at the beginning, I was working with them every single week. We had, you know, a call. They would set up a call every week. We'd go through it. Now it's like maybe once a month when they actually have something that they're, you know, really interested in moving forward with. So it just lessens, you know, the work up front lessens the work on the back end.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. That's really good to know. The next question, and I think this is kind of almost a follow-up, but it says, in the MFF underwriting template, can we only input the tax rate, mill rate in parentheses? Where should we include other tax information, such as the current asset value of the property, the percentage of the asset's value, fixed charge assessment, whether the property is reassessed upon acquisition or not, and whether the property is reassessed upon sale? I am going to put that one in the chat because that one was a really long question.
Yeah.
And I feel like that one, I'm going to throw it in the chat. That one seems like it was very elongated.
There's a lot to that. So currently, yes, our template only, we're only able to input the tax rate or the mill rate. And the formula currently is taking 80% of the purchase price, which we are assuming as the assessed value, just because most properties, they use those numbers to assess the property, you know, recent sales and things of that nature. So that's what we're currently doing. You can change, you know, the percentage at which they're assessing it in the formula. I know that that's might be taboo because we tell you not to touch the formulas. But if you only touch that, it doesn't ruin anything else. So that's how I would recommend doing that. And then as far as like it being reassessed at sale or reassessed at, you know, purchase, things like that, currently our template doesn't allow for that type of manipulation. It is something that we're working on because we do understand that that's, you know, that does change your numbers. But the way that we do approach it currently is the most conservative approach, meaning that we are going to assume that the taxes will increase that first year. And then if they don't, then you obviously have additional cash flow that first year to distribute to your investors.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That was, I know that question was very complex, so I really appreciate you going into depth with that. And so when we are underwriting, say a specific property and we're requesting the CoStar report, I guess what would be the most efficient way to get like a full CoStar report for the underwriting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So CoStar actually has what's called an underwriting report for individual properties. So usually when I'm, you know, breaking into a new market, I'll ask for the market report for the general market, and I'll underwrite deals with that first. You know, just general market standards. And then if a deal starts to, you know, pencil at the numbers that, you know, are my metrics, I will then request a specific underwriting report for that property. So you can just email into coaching@themultifamilymindset.com, send in the address of the property and request an underwriting report.
Awesome. And now will the CoStar underwriting report, like, will it just include the general property overview? Like the submarket report and the property rent comparables?
Yeah, so it'll give you information about the subject property, kind of where they're at currently, information on like the historics of it. Then it will go into rent comps. So there'll be, you know, it'll give you a certain number of rent comps, and it will give you basically the same information that it gave you on the subject property. So like where it's at, where their delinquencies have been, where their vacancy has been on each of those properties as well. And then it will give the construction overview. So what's coming to market, what the absorption rate is, you know, that type of thing. And it'll also give you sales comps. So this is something that is really important when you're building your exit plan for the property, is understanding like what properties are selling for near this property. And then sometimes, yes, it will give you information on the submarket. So, you know, for instance, if you're looking at I was just looking here, so I'm going to use this as an example, but Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City, Missouri is a city, but it's also a market. So then if you're looking, just outside Kansas City and say Liberty, then you'll want to pull a report for, the property in Liberty and look at the comps for that specifically as you're diving into it.
And do you, just a follow-up question to that as well, Jordan, do you advise us or even yourself to only rely on CoStar? Is there some way to sort of cross-check that information as well? Or is this a sort of method that you use to sort of cross-check with CoStar?
Yeah. No, I never recommend just using one source of data. As I mentioned before, I want to have all the facts. So a lot of the time I will, if I'm looking at a property specifically, I will cross-check the information provided on CoStar with the financials provided by the property management company, the information I can find online about the property as well. If I can find it on apartments.com or Zillow or anything like that, I want to make sure that all of it matches across the board. Now, if I'm looking at, market data such as, population growth, median household income, things like that, I'll sometimes look on like the Census Bureau, the city planning website, and verify those numbers that way.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, we actually a gentleman in our group here, Francisco, he introduced me personally to Bright Investor, and it's been a really good way to sort of cross-check that way. And I was wondering if you had any other good resources as well. So yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, I haven't personally used Bright Investor. It is something that, I've been interested in looking into. So maybe that will be next on my list. One other one that I really like is Marcus and Millichap puts out a market report as well. I really like looking at that. I'm trying to think of apartment. It's called ANL Apartment. Oh goodness, I can't remember what the name is, but I subscribe to them as well. They send me monthly reports on specific markets that I have, shown interest in. So that's been helpful as well. So I try and just get as much information as I can.
Of course.
Awesome.
ALN, yes, that's what it is. Thanks, Corey.
Oh, perfect. How would you say that you organize that? Because I imagine that you get like so much information coming in.
Yeah, so honestly, I need a better system because right now, the way that our company works is we organize everything into deal folders is what we do. And so we have, a folder for each deal that we're looking at. Anything that pertains to market research has its own folder. And then we usually have just like an Excel document in there with like the general key points that we're looking at. So like market rent, premium for renovated units, household income, population growth. We just gather it. We basically take all the information, like average it out, figure it all out, and just have one spot for it. But I definitely need a better way to do it because it's a lot of work.
No, yeah, I can imagine so much, especially like you're saying that you kind of subscribe to like monthly where they're giving you so much information so that like to be able to like figure out where everything should go, which I feel like is really part of is like kind of figuring out your system.
Yes.
Plays a huge part in being able to like absorb all of that information.
Yeah, it's been hard too. I'm not like I'm a very like driven, go get it type of personality. So I just like go. And then I look back and I'm like, wow, I need some more organization in my life. I need somebody to come in and say, okay, let's just clear this out and you do this and do this. And yeah, because if you let me loose, I'm just gonna go.
It seems like you have a team around you, enough to be able to do that.
Yes.
It's called I think it's Mary Kondoing. I don't know if you've heard of her.
It's so funny because in my personal life, I am very much so like, if you've ever been in my home, like it's very minimalistic. It's very just like, if there'll be times like when my husband and I first got married, I'd be like, oh, where's that shirt? And he's like, you threw it away because you said you hadn't worn it in 2 months. I'm like, oh, dang, I wish I still had that. And he's like, well, maybe you didn't throw everything away.
I do
Good to
that.
cleanse every now and then, you know,
It's
from your
yeah.
thing. I really enjoy that.
I've moved so many times in my life as well that like I don't want to hold on to things because I'm like, oh, then I have to move it, I have to pack it. So every time I move, I like throw so much stuff away. And my husband's like, we probably don't need to throw that away. And I'm like, well, we'll just, if we need it, we can get new in a couple years.
Oh my God, yes. I have I'm a season cycler, so I'll be like, oh, if I haven't worn this in X amount of time, it's like I'm getting rid of it. I don't need it anymore. But to kind of like tie in with like organization and I guess kind of just figuring out systems, what do you feel is like the most common mistake that us as new students may make when looking to underwrite a property?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, it really does come down to the research. I remember when Kim McCall started, one of our other coaches, she said, oh, underwriting is the most important part of a deal. And I was like, oh, I actually disagree. And she's like, you disagree? And I was like, yeah, honestly, it's the market research. Like if you don't have adequate research on the property, you can plug and play all day long, but like, is that even possible? So I think that the biggest mistake that a lot of people do is they go in with hopes and dreams and, you know, they try and throw something at the wall and they're like, that works, it's a perfect deal. And so rather than actually, you know, doing the necessary work prior to underwriting, they get really involved in the deal itself rather than the information surrounding the deal.
That's solid
That,
advice, not to fall in love with the
yeah.
property, right?
Yeah, fall in love with the data, not the
Yeah.
property.
Yeah. I feel like when you do fall in love with property, you tend to try to make it work for you now. Like
Yes.
you're looking for the information to make it work versus like looking at the information in front of you and being like, okay, I have to take it for what it is.
Yes, and I can tell you I've been a victim of that as well, where I get so like, oh, I'm gonna make it work, and you start making excuses for the property in a sense where you're like, well, if we could do this, then it would work. And it's like, well, ifs are fun, but like you can't, where's the data? So it's really important to, you know, understand what's actually possible.
100%. I actually want to dive deeper into that because that leads into our next question as well. You know, what do you think is a good example of when you knew you were making excuses for the property, you went deeper and then you were like, oh, I should have listened to myself, you know, in the first beginning phase of the underwriting.
For
Do you have
sure.
any examples at the top of your head?
I do. Actually, I hate sharing it because it's a very vulnerable time of, you know, my investing career, but I got involved in a deal that it went south. Like we ended up losing the deal due to not having enough done on it. But we were looking at, it was a townhome community that they were all kind of townhome style apartments. It was all, you know, it was an apartment, but they were townhome style, very large, very, you know, family oriented in a sense. And we were very interested in it. We found the research that, hey, we could increase these rents. I relied a little bit too much on somebody else's research. So they had told me, oh, well, there's this property that's getting this amount. When I looked into it, it was a totally different business model. It was very, you know, very much like new property. And I kind of, okay, we're already in the property. We already submitted. We're already like negotiating our PSA. I guess we'll just, you know, we'll try and get it. Then we went into the due diligence and I hadn't been to the property yet. This was my first experience really being super involved in the deal, because my previous experience was more on like that employee side where I did my job and then I passed it on to the next person who then did their job. So this was my first experience really diving into a deal as like it was mine. And so I hadn't been to the property. We were, you know, in our due diligence phase. So we didn't have, you know, a ton of time before like our earnest money went hard. And we got there and I was like, this is what the units look like. Like the pictures did not look like this. We walked into one unit that it was destroyed. There was like animal feces everywhere. The tile had been like ripped up. The countertop was like lifted off. And I was like, oh no, like we only accounted for, I think it was like $6,500 a unit in renovations. And I looked at that apartment and I was like, this is going to cost us $15,000. Like there's no way to get around this. And not all of them were like that, but there was a good amount of them that were like that. And so as we started getting deeper and deeper, I started making excuses. I said, okay, well, we can justify, paying a little bit more for this because then, maybe we can get a better tenant base in here. Because the issue was that it was a very like workforce tenant base that was currently living there. And, we had assumed that it was the higher class tenant base that was like a couple streets over, and it wasn't. So as we started getting this information, I did exactly what I teach against now, and just was like, well, we could do this, and we'll we can do a credit from the seller for half of this, and then we'll cover half of this, and then we'll do like I just made it work in a sense. And we ended up not closing the deal because the numbers weren't solid. There was no, I couldn't provide the data that showed that was possible. So yeah, we ended up not being able to close the property. We ended up, losing a lot of money for earnest money. And we burned a bridge with a broker because he had confidence in us to be able to close, we weren't able to. So yeah, that's what I would say was a very bad example. Don't do that. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and, do your proper due diligence up front.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That seems like a very, very vulnerable time in there, but yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can learn from that too. Because at the end of the day, I'm surprised also the broker didn't necessarily, I know they're trying to obviously sell the property and everything, but do you place all the blame on you in that sense for doing that, or is there sort of like a like a shared responsibility with the broker for not sharing that that information, or at least like the pictures of the properties? What do
Yeah,
you
I think a little bit of both. That's where my skepticism of brokers really came into play. Was I was like, okay, like their job truly is to sell this property. Like that is their number one job. And if I show interest in that property, they're going to do everything in their power to sell me that property. So I have become very, like, in my conversations with brokers, I'm still very friendly. I'm still very get to know them, that type of thing. But I'm also very stern and very like, this is where my line's at. And I'm really just not willing to cross that line. And I appreciate you for, trying to show me different ways to look at it. But that's across my line, and I'm not going to do that. And honestly, from that, like, I've established really good relationships with brokers because they understand, like, oh, she actually looks at things and she's not going to just be pushed around.
100%. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. That's a vulnerability that was wide open. So we really appreciate that. Nancy also had wrote, thank you for sharing. It really helps all of us hear stories of things, how things can go wrong. Francisco also added, appreciate that you shared that vulnerability of your deal that went south on you. We really do appreciate it, especially as, new students.
I want to add one thing too, is we, partnerships are such a big part of multifamily. And I also was in a partnership that I knew wasn't the right partnership. I had put a lot of trust in someone that I didn't know very well. I had, kind of, I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but naively, I guess is a good word, just believed that everyone had the same values as I did. And I was burned because that, I had a partner that just flat out lied to me a lot. And, told me, oh, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. This is the conversation. And I believed them. And that ended up biting us in the butt in the end when, they had said that all of these things were happening. And when it came down to it, they weren't happening. So it's really important to, partner yourself up with people that that you like, that you trust, that you have similar values as, because this is like, money changes people too. So when you start looking at these multi-million-dollar deals, people get dollar signs in their eyes, and they, they shift who they are. So you want to make sure that you have those tough conversations in the beginning with your partnership as well.
Of course. And another question for you too with that, as a follow-up, with the people that you had, in your team, you starting out, were they local to you in, in your area, or were they, remote all over the place, across the states? Because that also adds another barrier, right?
Sure, for sure. Yeah. So now, so they were not local to where I am. It was somebody out of state that I had only ever met, online. Never really met them in person. The first time I met them in person was when we went out to do the due diligence on the property.
Oh, wow.
And in that moment, I should have walked away, if I'm being honest. The way that they had treated the individuals that were there, the words that they spoke, about people behind other people's back, I was like, oh my gosh, this is not who I am. But I was like, oh, I'm already in it. I can't back out. And that was a mistake on my end. And I'm a firm believer in you should meet your people before getting, married to them in a sense. You should, have those hard conversations. You should, be able to, talk to them as if they are a true partner. And I will say now that my team, we have lots of hard conversations and we do meet up in person quite often. One of my team members lives very close to me. The other two, they are still out of state, but we make it a point to, still meet up quite often and, really prioritize building our team.
100%. That's one of the things that we love about our group here, specifically our friends Wendy, Lisa, and Francisco as well, because just attending they have calls every Monday, and just seeing how they don't just talk business. Like, what I like about them is that they actually form that true relationship right first.
Yeah.
It's always good to just shoot from the hip, I guess you could say, right?
Exactly.
And establish
Yeah.
that first.
Yeah.
And they're very big on personal development. That has to be added.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's, a big thing too, when you're kind of yoking yourself with someone else, like if they're not willing to do the work and they're not willing to like become a better version of themselves too, then like it's really hard. It's really hard to, kind of drag them along. And yeah, but it's important to be, friends with your partners, but also, maintain a professional atmosphere as well. Cause sometimes, you get too friendly with people and it's like, oh, I don't want to tell them that they're, doing this wrong because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And it's like, well, no, like you don't have to like hurt their feelings, but you can, share knowledge with them to help them better themselves as well.
100%.
Yeah, I think sometimes we might be afraid to be sometimes blunt with others, but it's like, I think that you do them an injustice if you're not having those conversations. Because we're all trying to like grow and be better. Like no one's perfect. And I think we're all constantly learning. And I would hope that if I'm doing something wrong, that same person would come to me and be like, hey, no, this is a better way that you could do it. Or let me show you a different method.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's really easy to get caught up in the feelings of things like, ooh, I don't want to tell them because they're probably going to be upset about it. And one thing that I've learned is like feelings aren't facts. Like, I don't know that they're going to be upset about what I'm sharing with them. All I know is like, there's a right way and a wrong way to do something. So I need to share the right way with them. And if they're upset about it, then honestly, like, that's on them. Like I can't control their feelings. All I can control is the information I'm able to share with them.
I feel like we've been very lucky to be able to have partnerships with a couple of people that are here and, even people that aren't here today, and where I truly feel comfortable enough to talk to them, just as if I'm seeing them every day in my life. So I'm thankful for that. But I did want to open up the floor to anyone in the group right now if they wanted to ask a question to you, because we are getting a little bit closer to the end. So I want to give anyone the opportunity to ask a question. So you can raise a hand or put it in the chat and I will go ahead and read it off, whatever anyone's most comfortable with.
I know that Kevin King had a question about the dog park value add. What do you think about that value add personally in any of the properties that you've acquired or that have seen or underwritten? That's a fairly popular way to
It
add
is.
to a property, no?
Yeah, so I think understanding the demographics of the people in the area is important as well, because a dog park itself is not something that you're going to get monetary value from. You can't charge someone to use a dog park. You can't charge them more because there is a dog park, but you will draw people in that have pets because it's going to be something that, if you have a dog park and somebody else doesn't, that is going to be a selling point for them to move to your property rather than another. So if you're in a demographic where, dogs are not normal, companion, a lot of people are saying that, millennials and Gen Z are, they're becoming dog parents first. So, if you're in a younger demographic, it's more likely that is going to be the case. It was really eye-opening for me when one of my coworkers, as I mentioned, I've always owned a home. And then we lived in Arizona for a few years and moved back to Utah where I'm at now. And we stayed in an apartment for like 9 months while we were looking for a home here. And I remember they were like, oh yeah, we didn't have any pets, but they were like, oh, the pet fee is $75 a month. And I was like, nope, like I'll wait till I have my own home to get a pet. And one of my coworkers lived like very close to where we were at, and he's like, yeah, they just increased our pet rent. We have to pay a non-refundable $400 deposit and $75 a month. And I was like, and you're gonna do it? And he's like, well, yeah, like my I think he had a cat. He's like, my cat is my family. And I was like, okay, so it really is true. Like people, like that is part of their family, and they're just willing to pay for it. But like, not gonna lie, my mom got rid of a cat when I was younger because she was like, I'm not paying that pet fee. Like, we will rehome that cat before I pay that. So it really depends on the demographic for sure.
Gotcha. Just to bring that back to the community, I guess it really depends on your community building within your property, right? Because to me, it seems more of a community play than anything. Like you said, you can't
Exactly.
monetize it directly.
Yes. Yep.
So Francisco did submit a question. Did you want to read it off, Eric?
Sure, sure. So Francisco did mention with the changing demographics, how would you forecast what value adds carry more value in the MSAs you are underwriting for? And a second question to that, I will hold off. I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah. So I think it really comes into play with I think weather is a big thing, set for like covered parking or the reserved parking, that type of thing. That's something that I've seen a really big player in. The other thing, as I mentioned before, is the demographic or the age demographic. It's just kind of natural that certain age groups are many pinners, other age groups are splurge and treat yourself type of people. So it's just looking at the demographic in the area, then also looking at other properties. I mentioned calling other properties, understanding what they're charging for, because yes, you can be kind of the pioneer in a new value add, but it might take a little bit of time for that to catch on. But if other properties in the area are already charging for certain value adds, it's more likely that you're going to be able to get that value add.
Gotcha. I guess the second question was, I believe you already answered it in the first part, really, was there are many value add potentials. Which ones do you see being the go-to? And a question I had to attach to that is, what have you seen the most creative?
Yeah. I actually just looked at a deal today where it backs up to like this little lake and there's like some docks. The person was looking at doing like renting dock space because it was like for boats. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So that's the most creative one that I've ever seen. And then some of the go-tos, I really just focus on obviously rent and then laundry. Everybody has to do laundry. So if it's, something that you can put laundry in units, or if there's laundry space on the site that, people can use if they don't have hookups in their units. Those are really my biggest focuses. And then reserved parking as well, depending on the market.
Gotcha. Thank you for answering that. Thank you, Francisco, for the question. And we have another one from our friend Luis Almanza. Once a deal meets your buy box, what things in your underwriting that keep the deal from moving forward, and avoid spending too much time on the template?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I initially, so if it meets our buy box, as in like it's within our purchase price range, it's within our unit count range, it's within, our area that we're looking at, then I'll do a quick underwriting on it. It's really just like a plug and play. I just plug the data in that is provided to me from the broker. If it doesn't hit my metrics, which we're looking at a 15% IRR, 8.5% cash on cash, if it's not hitting those or not within 2 to 3% of those, I usually just pass on it, because it does take a lot of time to go in and verify all those things. If it does meet the criteria and is in, a growing area, then I will dive into it and basically start verifying the information that was provided to me with the data. So if they said, oh, you can increase rents $200, okay, I initially put that in, but can I really increase my, my rents $200? Where's the information that shows that?
Keep it conservative.
Yes.
Thank you, Luis, for
love
that
that.
question.
And so if anyone else has one more question before I ask my final question, and I love this question, so I try to save it at the end because I really like hearing this.
You should make a montage after a couple, after a couple months of doing these interviews. You should have just a montage of that, because people have come up with some really good answers to it. So,
Yeah. So my last question, because I just to be respectful of everybody's time, is how has multifamily investing changed your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, it has provided a path for me to really hone in on my stroke of genius. I love what I do on a daily basis. I love, the ability to provide value to others. So, looking at these investment deals, really analyzing them and seeing, how they work. It's like a big puzzle piece. It's enjoyable. And as I've really dove into this more and more, I have noticed that this is my stroke of genius. This is, something that I thoroughly enjoy and I'm really good at. And it's been something that, as I become a mother, is I want to teach my daughter that, everybody has different skills. Everybody has, different things that they enjoy doing. And if you can really hone in on that and, work towards really just focusing on that, you're going to do amazing things in the world.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us and answering so many questions.
yes,
Well, thank you for having
and sharing so much, being very vulnerable. It is, it's always nice to have someone open up, especially because vulnerability can be such a tricky thing. It's hard to open up, especially to a panel of, a bunch of people, maybe people you haven't had the chance to talk to, but we really appreciate you taking your time. Francisco did put in the chat as well. Thank you, Jordan. It's always a pleasure to hear your insights each and every time you speak. Greatly appreciate you being vulnerable on your stepping stones. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. And I just want to leave you guys with, vulnerability is definitely a hard thing, but growth really does happen in uncomfortable spaces. So put yourself out there, be in uncomfortable spaces and push yourselves to excel in those areas.
Yeah, for sure. Jordan, I cannot imagine you being an introvert. I believe I heard you on a call that you were just a numbers person, but I cannot imagine you being that.
It's funny. I literally just had a conversation this morning with one of my students where they're like, you're so outgoing. And I was like, honestly, I'm not. Growing up, I was very shy. I've always loved talking to people, but it's Like, I've never been the one to initiate it. I've always been like, if you talk to me, I will happily talk back, but I'm not going to go out of my way to initiate a conversation. And still to this day, just last week, there was like a girls' night that I got invited to, and I didn't really know anybody. And I made all the excuses all day long. Oh, I'm not going to go. I don't feel good. Oh, it's too late. Oh, I'm not going to go. My husband's like, it sounds like you're just making excuses for not like going and meeting new people. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Because it's uncomfortable, but I taught myself a couple of years ago that, you know, successful people talk to people. Successful people, you know, put themselves out there to sometimes get shot down. And I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's been a journey, but it's getting better.
I love that. Thank you so much for
definitely
taking time
reflects.
again. Yes, for sure. And
I
yeah, it's
just
been
also
great to
wanted to
hear from
add,
you guys. Sorry, Jen.
I just wanted to add in that Marquise also said, thank you so much, Jordan.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your night.
You
You as well,
too.
Jordan. Thank you,
And
guys.
thank you everyone for spending
Yeah.
time here.